Giving free one-sided therapy to the stars of reality. It's Rachel and Kacie with CBT and the TV. CBT and the TV.
Hello, darlings, dears, and fellow queers, and welcome back to CBT in the TV. As always, I am Kacie, not Rachel.
And I am Rachel, not Kacie.
And this week, we are... Wow, buddy, we have made it to the very first ever, the inaugural solo week for the ALDC. And this will go down in history. It is a canon event. We cannot stop it, not just because it hasn't happened. By the time you and I are filming this, it's a decade old at this point, over a decade old. But and also, like, we couldn't have stopped it if we wanted to, even if we'd been there, because it's a requirement. It's a wild ride, and I'm going to tell all of our friends, be prepared to turn up the listening speed, because this is a long slog. I do not know how they fit it all into 42 minutes on Hulu. I suspect witchcraft and wizardry.
And
Yes.
for those who have listened to the last 3 episodes, you will see what we're talking about when we bring up, hey, remember this thing, because it's coming up.
Yes.
I just didn't realize how soon some
No.
of those things would come back up.
No, that's another thing I'm getting from this watch through is I was like, really, already? I thought we had at least a year. I thought the girls had a year before we had to deal
Right.
with this. Why? But before we have to go through trauma tunnel, let's take a detour to Rachel and Kacie's Jar of Fun and see what we can find for today for some happiness, because Lord knows we're gonna need it.
Oh, yeah.
All right, what is something we have to celebrate this week, Rachel? What's something you have to celebrate?
Well, we were just talking about this before we hit record, but Kacie and I have officially been friends on Facebook, because it's not official, so it's Facebook official, for 12 years.
12
And I did
years.
the math, and that is 40% of my life.
I know.
So almost half my life.
About half our
I have
lives
been
together.
here.
Holy bananas. Yeah. I was struck by that, and I was thinking about it when I saw the announcement on my time hop. I was like, I think this is about as long as we would have been friends as well, because this should have been around the time we were getting ready for the fall concert at school. And fall concert was the first time that I talked to you, because you and I were the two that were stranded in the choir room. We didn't have anything to go or anywhere to go. We didn't have cars to get ourselves places at the time. So you and I were stuck in the choir room, and we weren't talking to each other because we didn't know each other. We were just sitting in different, as far away from each other as we could get in that small-ish room. And
Listen, even sometimes when I know a person, I will sit in complete silence.
Yes,
with
but
them.
this was not the
that doesn't
comfortable
matter.
silence that you and I are now capable of reaching. This was definitely should I go somewhere else? Should I find somewhere else? No, I'm allowed to be here. And I don't remember if my headphones weren't working or if I just didn't have them with me or I couldn't find them. But I remember I was like, I got to turn on some music. I have to have some background noise. This is so uncomfortable. And I went hey, your name's Rachel, right? And you were like, yes. And I was like, okay, I'm going to turn on some music, and I'm going to warn you, it's going to have some bad words. Because all I knew about you was what our choir teacher kept telling the group, which was that you came from the private Christian school. So you and I were in different sections in choir, and all the first sopranos were like, oh my gosh, she must think that we are the most godless heathens on the face of the planet, because we were, the first sopranos, we were just, we were nuts. We were nuts, and we were, whoa, buddy.
Understatement.
Yeah.
Understatement.
Turns out Rachel was also similarly aligned.
Secret
as far
heathen.
as troublemaking tendencies, but I didn't know that yet.
I think even a couple years into it, when we went to choir parties and would play Cards Against Humanity, the choir director would still be shocked when
gosh.
I would play something, and he's like, you
and then you and then Riley, who I'd gone to high school with. It was just it was anybody who was quiet. He did it to me my first year too, even though obviously I'm not and never was. someone you needed to worry about offending.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone would be shocked anytime Riley played a card that was like outlandish. And Riley and I had taken a lot of classes together in high school, and people would be like, "Can you believe Riley played that?" And I'd be like, "Yes." And I've told
Yeah.
you many times, you shouldn't, don't talk to me about this. I can't with you. So anyway, yes, Rachel and I have, as of today, spent about 50% of our lives together. Well, 40%, but part of that we weren't really conscious human beings. So here we go. Well, buddy. And with that, we're gonna head in to we're gonna check into our drinks and snacks, because if we're gonna make it out of this alive, we need as many comfort items as possible. Rachel, what are you eating and drinking today?
Kirkland's signature acai blueberry
Ooh.
pomegranate vitamin water, one of my favorites.
Classy. I don't mean that sarcastically.
And a off-brand Uncrustables.
I am drinking my giant Yeti worth of water. I have some strawberry Pocky and the
Got
life
some solid foods today.
I know, right? I'm excited, proud of myself. And then my lifeblood. I should say we're not sponsored by Alani. It would be very nice if that ever happened to me in my life. But it's just my Alani Peach energy drink, because without it, I would not have finished the script. All right, let's get into the gigantic pile of fun awaiting us. So we start the episode with the girls already at Pyramid again, and Abby tells the girls to give themselves a round of applause for their win last weekend, and she tells Brooke some very nice things about her performance, how she wowed the audience around her. Abby says everyone that was sitting around her when Brooke did her handstand twist were just like, wow. And it's just nice to hear Abby praise anybody aside from Maddie publicly, but it's also really, really nice for it to be Brooke because of what Brooke just went through last week. Then, of course, she flips that coin right around and then says, "And Brooke, what was all that drama with the hip?" And tells Brooke that the next time she's hurt, she needs to just go to Abby. And Abby says, "I want to make sure that's clear. You don't need to be running to your mother." Which, if I recall, Abby sent Brooke to go tell her mom that she was hurt. Or at least that's how they made it appear in the last episode. So,
but I mean, also, as we see in future episodes, Abby sure ran to her mom a lot.
oh, well, there's that. But, and also, like, you can't tell a kid not to run to their mom and actively send them to their mother. It doesn't work that way. That's literally there's no Salulu to that Delulu. You created it yourself.
You're the problem, it's you.
Yes. She says she wants to make that abundantly clear. Like, she wants to make sure that is clear with all the girls. They don't go to their moms if they're hurt. They come to her and she'll handle it. And Kelly tells us in an interview that she thinks that's absolutely inappropriate and ridiculous what Abby's saying. If Brooke is hurt, she needs to come to her, because if Brooke hadn't come to her last week, she wouldn't have been able to take her to the chiropractor, provide the ice packs and the heat pads that made it so that Brooke's body was comfortable enough to go on stage and pull off the performance that won for Abby. Which, yes, ma'am, way to go, Kelly. Indeed. Abby then announces that we are going to Onstage New York competition. That is the name of the competition. We don't get to go to New York because we get to stay right here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we all know what that means. At-home competitions for Abby they're going to go over about as well as you can all imagine they're going to go. Abby tells us that these at-home comps are just super important to her because all her peers will be there, all her competitors will be there, and all her enemies will be there. And
I think it's interesting that she differentiates between competitors and enemies.
It reminded me of like the Express Christmas episode of Modern Family, when the mom sends the family letter to the Modern Family and says friends, family, and others, and everyone's like, who's others? And Sofia Vergara's character's like, me, I think I'm others. I think Abby's kind of a little, they're in the same boat where they view everybody very compartmentalized. And
Abby is very black and white in her thinking.
Everything is one side of the coin or the other, and those they have faces in inextricably linked, but they can't face one another. So Abby moves on to the pyramid, and she makes a big deal of saying that a new person has climbed to the top of the pyramid, and voila, it is Brooke, and we are so happy to see it. But Brooke tells us
Is that the first and only time? I can't remember.
that Brooke is at the top of the pyramid. Absolutely not.
Oh, fabulous.
Brooke tells us in an interview that while it feels good to be at the top, she doesn't really care where she's at the pyramid. She doesn't care if she's at the top or at the bottom. It doesn't really
She doesn't
matter.
really want to be there.
Yeah, she doesn't want to be there. Abby tells us that based on her performance last weekend, Brooke will have a solo, and that Maddie and Chloe will have solos too. And then she says to the other three girls, like, and what am I supposed to do with the four of you? Oh, I guess it'd be four. The four of you at the bottom. What am I supposed to do with the rest of you? And I'm just like, so you're so warm and fuzzy, Abby. And this is how we find out that this is going to be our first ever solo week. These are something that will go down in history and infamy in Dance Moms lore forever and ever. Them. They will become seemingly a bigger and bigger deal every year. And I feel like that might have been producers, but I could also see Abby making it a bigger thing every year. Like, if I have to do all this work for each and every girl, they're going to have to earn something. Like, ugh. Kathy is pissed because she just knows that Vivi's going to have to do that bee dance. And she says Vivi isn't comfortable with new choreography. And to me, I just feel like Kathy is scrambling here. Like, she knows Vivi's not prepared again after Abby told her last week, like, of all the parents, I expect you to have her the most prepared. You're a dance teacher. She didn't do it.
But also, is she just going to dance the same dance for the rest of her life? She's not comfortable with new choreography.
I feel another thought that crossed my mind when Kathy said that was, I was like, is Vivi not comfortable with new choreography, or are you not comfortable with Vivi doing anybody but your choreography? The girls start rehearsals, and we still get to play our favorite guessing game, Rachel, because someone's got to kick off rehearsals. And do you want to guess who we're going to start with?
Maddie.
Yeah, I was going to say, she may not be at the top of the pyramid, but she's at the top of the list for rehearsals.
For everything.
Even though we do know, and it has already been mentioned, that Maddie has like daily privates. So daily private lessons. So she was having plenty of time to work on these solos. She did not need extra time with Abby in front of the cameras.
Especially that tap solo.
Oh, especially both of these. The other dance she's doing is Cry. She already won with that.
I know. I was going to bring that one back up because we mentioned, whether it was last week or the week before, that this was going to be a recurring solo that we see.
Mm-hmm. And I was thinking of something later that, like, years later when Cry comes back up and it includes Maddie, but it is not about Maddie. That's the one that I was thinking of, because I was like, we just never, ever in our lives get away from this damn solo. And don't get me wrong, it is very good. But no 8-year-old needs to have the same solo brought up for the rest of her life. While Maddie is running Cry, Abby tells us that Maddie's actually going to be doing the 2 solos that you and I have already talked about this weekend. The thing to note here is that the moms and Abby, everybody had to use certain language to kind of get around talking about the show. Saying Maddie's competing 2 solos this week actually means that Maddie is going to have 2 solos featured on the show this week. Maddie did compete her 2 solos everywhere they went, just like if Chloe had a lyrical and a musical theater solo, Chloe competed both of those in their respective categories. Same thing with Paige, same thing with Nia. It's not uncommon. That's not the point. The point is they made sure that Maddie's 2 solos were going to be featured on the TV show, one of which had already been featured. And they were going to give her the extra rehearsal time to make sure those rehearsals were filmed. And neither of Maddie's solos needed any changes. The only change that happened to any of Maddie's stuff for this week is Maddie's tap solo. She went on stage and performed without music. They dubbed the music in, we hear later. Maddie did not need extra rehearsal. And Maddie tells us in an interview that she loves solos and she thinks that she does her best when she's dancing alone. And I don't know that this was a produced thing, and I don't think she's trying to be mean. I think she enjoyed dancing solos, and that's fine. I think, along with the other stuff producers make her say and then play throughout this episode, makes her look bad, and it's rude. Don't do that to an 8-year-old.
I mean, I can definitely see it, because then, when you're in a group, you have to focus on timing it with everybody and being expressive, and then other people, comparing.
Well, and Abby
there's just a lot of drama with the group.
Well, and Abby
too.
also used to put a lot of pressure on Maddie in the group to be the one holding the counts, to be the one with the great musicality. A solo, if Maddie's doing it right, Abby doesn't tell her, and her other solo teachers aren't telling her, be sure you're watching for this, count louder so the people in the back can hear you. She only has to worry about herself.
Mm-hmm. I also want to make sure that I say, like, I don't think that it's wrong of Abby to put in 2 solos.
No.
Like, the moms do have issue with this. And it's throughout the episode. But I disagree with their having an issue with it.
But again, I think the important thing here to note is that they're having to use language to get around talking about what they're saying is the issue is that Maddie's 2 solos are featured on the show, not that she's competing them. The whole studio, Abby's whole studio went to this competition. So many dances were competed that day that we didn't see. Chloe and Maddie do a duet that we don't see. The point isn't that Maddie is dancing 2 dances. The point is they're doing it for the show. They're making sure Maddie gets seen on camera. And by doing that, they're taking away the only rehearsal time that the other girls could ever get. All right, Kacie is running Vivi's solo, and she's not happy. She tells us in an interview that she doesn't want Vivi doing this dance, and that Vivi doesn't want to jump into a new dance. Except, once again, Kacie, this is not a new dance. She doesn't have to change anything. She just has to learn the choreography that she was already given. And Vivi has 2 dance studios to work at. I think she's just trying to cover her butt. And to have something to complain about, because if Kathy's not complaining, she's not happy, which is weird to me, but oh well. Abby is running Paige's solo, and Paige's solo is an acro jazz number. This was her regular studio solo, but they wanted to change the music because they couldn't get the rights to Boys, Boys, Boys by Lady Gaga, which was her regular song. We'll get into this later. I do not know.
Pertinent.
But I do not know for the life of me why they couldn't have dubbed Paige's solo. I don't understand. Why? Why can you do it for one kid and not the other? The moms head over to Mohan's, and I will say that the production did a really great job of making it seem like they go somewhere, like they go off-site. And like technically, yes, they do, but Mohan's was across the parking lot from Abby's studio. This was like yards from Abby's front door. This is not like they left. And that'll come into play shortly. Christy says that Mohan's is a special place that they come to get away from all the drama at the dance studio. And they had been going there for years. And that they invited Kacie this time because they want her to feel included and like she's a part of the team. The moms talk about last week's competition. Christy and Kelly and Holly kind of confront Kacie about leaving last week so early. And Kacie tells them that she and Vivi are just in this for different reasons, that they don't want a cheering section. Christy and Kelly and Holly all seem to try to communicate that Kacie says she wants to be a part of the team, and that part of that, and an important part of that, is that each mom cares about all of the girls on the team like they're their own. Mm-hmm. And if Kacie is going to keep saying, you won't let me in, you won't let me be a part of the team, one of the ways you do that is by building camaraderie with the girls, not just going out with the moms. You can be friends with us, but that won't help. Like, Kacie tells them that they might like having a cheer section and being there for one another, but that's their like, and it's not hers. And like, look, I'm not saying I'm down for yucking someone else's yum, but like,
why wouldn't you want to have support for your kid?
That's
like
what I'm
that?
saying. I'm like, this is a weird thing to not like it's like she's missing the point. Like, she's only hearing that you have to be there to be rah-rah, and not hearing that the parts behind that are the picking up and carrying each other's children through life, and that's what makes it a team. Back at the studio, Abby is running Brooke's solo, and Brooke's solo was another one that was an old solo just set to new music. Her costume was an old one that she really loved. It was her Tinkerbell costume. Brooke has talked about that costume for years. She loved it. And another thing to note that's interesting is Brooke's solos in the early seasons were almost always her old solos, just set to new music. And I think this kind of sets Brooke up later when Abby yells at her, like, all she can do is the old stuff. She just does the same things over and over again. She never has anything new. Abby barred the Highland girls from practicing at her studio for coming in for regular class, and also their contracts didn't allow them to study anywhere else. And she kept Brooke doing the same things for years. Where was Brooke ever supposed to learn to do anything else, Abby? Unsurprisingly, Brooke is doing an acro contortion number, and Brooke tells us in an interview that she likes to dance, but she likes hanging out with her friends more and boys. But I feel like the and boys bit was just super produced. Like, the producers made her say that. It does not sound like Brooke. Like, the saying she likes hanging out with her friends more, that sounded genuine. The other bit, I was like, uh-huh. I'm not saying she doesn't like boys. I'm just saying I don't think she would have said that on camera. Next up is Nia's solo rehearsal. Nia's solo is a Cuban jazz routine, and this is the start of what seems like a
Typecasting.
never-ending set of solos for Nia that are what Abby calls ethnic dances. Now, Rachel, Abby has said, like, since Dance Moms, that Nia uses her race to make herself different because Nia wants to be different and doesn't want to fit in. Abby saying things like this, but then also requiring Nia to only do solos. In the first 3 to 4 years of Dance Moms, we only see Nia do ethnic dances, or even when she gets a lyrical dance, it has to be about Maya Angelou or Harriet Tubman. We only see her do one dance that's not, and that's in season 2 when she does the princess dance against Kendall. What does this say about Abby? That she weaponizes Nia's identity in her race when Nia uses it herself to find power, but commercialized it as a dance teacher.
It makes me think of, and I'm sure that you can picture in your mind somebody who would say something like that of, well, there's black privilege too. You can picture that person in your mind.
I know them.
Yes. And they are the people who see themselves as victims, but they're really successful because they've had to work hard. So why can't they just work hard too? But we very well know that society has these invisible barriers for marginalized people, whether they're gay, disabled, Black, Hispanic, immigrants, you name it. They have these invisible barriers because society puts them there, but then are expected to perform like a privileged person. And the privileged people look at that and are like, well, I had a rough life too. I often say, like, passive allyship is active oppression. Like, if you are not being active in your allyship, you are participating in the system of oppression against that people group that you are saying you're an ally to. The way that Abby went about it, she would say, they're going to be looking for you to be able to do this because you're ethnic and you can fill all of these different roles. I think she probably could have said it in a better way.
She often said the fact that Nia would have an advantage at certain auditions, like no one else. Like Abby would say, like, I'm not going to send anyone else to audition for The Lion King. Nia's got a privilege there. And it's like,
you can send anybody to audition for The Lion King.
There are white people in The Lion King on Broadway. There are white people in the tour. What are you? Just because Abby, shut up. Of course, then this is followed up by Abby yelling at Nia about her legs and her feet, and Abby gets out our infamous bats, and we just needed Abby
to threaten physical violence. It's not okay. Like, if I did something wrong, my boss would not come and spank me. Like, it's not okay for that to be the case.
Because the child can never consent to that. And that's the other thing about this that just screamed at me when I saw Nia there, of like, she has no ability to say no to that. She has no ability to get away. We're not in Nia's head. We don't know if she was okay with it, but she was also told to be okay with it. Nia tells us in an interview that Abby's always correcting her feet and her legs, and that if Abby keeps helping her, one day she's gonna be a star like that. And I love Nia and her. She's so cute.
But that's also a very fond response.
Yes,
It's very much I will receive the abuse because
Yeah. Kenzie's solo rehearsal is next. Thank goodness. My sweet baby. I just love her. She's so cute. She's doing an acro routine. I do not know if this was her regular studio routine for the year. I would assume it is, but I don't know if it's an old one. Not sure.
I love how excited she was about it. And she's like, acro's my favorite. I love like flipping.
I
was like, why is she not in gymnastics?
It was tumbling. I could tumble all day. I'm just like, you are. I know. I wish. Kenzie's running her dance, and Abby tells us in an interview that people might think she's tough, but she worries about these kids like they're her own. Listen, Abby, after what we just saw you do, like A+ parenting, shut the fuck up.
She worries about the Zieglers like they're her own.
I know she worries about Maddie like they're her own. She had a soft spot for Mackenzie, but I don't think she loved Mackenzie quite the same. And I think Mackenzie was consistently aware of that. Then, of course, right on cue, Kenzie forgets her choreography, and she forgets it while she's on the floor. And the thing of it is, like, the girls have been trained to just go on dancing, but I think that's a lot harder when you're doing floor work. Like, when you're doing acro floor work and you forget what's next, it's hard to, like, come up with something. I don't know. And she's 6, okay? And Abby, Kenzie starts to cry because she's sad and freaked.
And she's 6.
And she's 6, and she's doing it in front of the cameras. I think this was her first solo in front of cameras. She'd done duets and a group dance. But Abby tells her to suck it up because she doesn't want to see those tears. And I'm just like, oh yeah, Abby, you'd make such a great mom. Broadway baby's so lucky. Kenzie tells us in an interview one of the most iconic things that Mackenzie ever says in her entire life, which will unfortunately come back to haunt her later in life, but is the best thing she's ever said. I love dancing, but I don't want to go on Broadway. I just want to stay at home and eat chips. And I just...
And of course, she says it with her little Kenzie smile.
I
with
know.
her little, like,
She's
two missing front teeth.
She's like a little pixie. She's, oh my goodness. She's the cutest
unfiltered
little thing ever. I don't know what we did to deserve Mackenzie Ziegler on Dance Moms, but I am so glad as a society that we did it, because without her, this show would just be one painful episode after another. She is the bright spot. She's so cute. All the girls are bright spots, but baby Mackenzie just... all right. Back at Mohan's, the moms are still at it. Kathy tells the moms that things are just different for her and Vivi because she's Abby's colleague, so they're on a different page. Kathy says
that's the narcissistic piece. That's the I have to be a part of an elevated status.
Kathy says that Abby, this part, oh my god, I can't believe they actually left it in the episode, because I feel like this could have been grounds for a lawsuit. Kathy says that Abby is making a ton of money off her, and the moms say she's making a ton of money off of all of us, and Kathy says she's probably making more off of me because she's probably charging me double. Abby literally can't do that. And saying it on TV and then putting it out on TV,
that is the
ugliest effing necklace I've ever seen in my life. And then she says, so here's the part where making it look like Mohan's is further away from the dance studio comes into play. Christy takes her last sip of wine, and Kathy says, oh my god, are you driving? No, she's not. She's walking back to her child's dance studio, where she's probably going to wait for several more hours for her child to be done with rehearsal and be just fine to drive home. It's now the next day, and Chloe is learning her solo. It's important to note here that Chloe is the only one with a brand new solo, brand new costume, brand new music, brand new choreography. She's the first one to have to do it in such a short period of time. That will also become a recurring theme. Chloe will be the person who she'll have to be the person to do things first.
Oh my goodness. It's a whole narcissistic family system. You have the narcissist, the enabler, Melissa, the golden child, Maddie, the scapegoat, Chloe.
Yep. And in another, we're already starting a series of things off that will live in perpetuity in our lives. Chloe's solo's called Mother. And I'm just like, this is something that Abby does to Chloe and Christy moving forward in Dance Moms. She creates solos around Chloe having a quote unquote bad mother, or Christy being a bad mother, or how much Abby hates Chloe's mother. And it's so nice to see it starting so early. Chloe is running the dance and she falls out of her side aerial and lands, and you can see on Chloe's face, because she jumps right back up and gets right back into dancing and she looks terrified. You can see it on her face that she's anticipating that Abby's going to scream at her. But instead, Abby goes, "Oh, you okay, honey?" And Chloe goes, "Yeah, I'm fine." And then continues dancing, and it just like it like broke my heart a little. I was like, I know that feeling.
It was like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Uh-huh.
Hypervigilance.
Chloe tells us in an interview that she thinks her biggest competition is Maddie, because Maddie is a good dancer, but some people have told her that she's a good dancer too, and she says it with her cute little Chloe sass, and I love her. I love our babies. We transition then to Maddie's tap solo rehearsal, and again, this is also Maddie's regular studio tap rehearsal, or tap solo. No changes being made. Maddie has a separate rehearsal time for this solo. So I really don't understand why they didn't film the private. It also would have been nice. Maybe the tap teacher didn't want to be on camera, but they could have run it with Gia, who was on the show. Like, it would have just been nice to, like, it would have also let us in further behind the scenes. Like, we didn't need to see more produced stuff, which is another reason I'm like, I feel like the moms were mad for a decent reason. Like, we didn't need this. We didn't need it. Christy and Kelly are in the den talking about Maddie having 2 solos and wondering whose idea that was, Melissa or Abby's. And in an interview, Christy tells us that no one has a chance in hell in winning against Maddie. Back in the den, Christy says she can't get rehearsal time for Chloe to work on her new solo. And Kelly says she can't get Paige's new music. And Christy replies, well, Melissa's the one who's in charge of music, so isn't that ironic? But I do want to point out that we know moving forward that production loved to fuck with music. Much like Cake, it is one of the things that they use to manipulate the students and the staff and the cast and everybody the most. So I don't think 100% this was Melissa. I think this might have been the first case of production. We then pan over to see that Kathy has been sitting in the den with Christy and Kelly, but she's been sitting apart from them, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, oh Lord, what did she hear and what is she about to do? Kathy then heads out to the front desk to talk to Melissa, and you're like, oh Lord, what's about to happen? But instead they just have like a very surface level, superficial mean girl, like quintessential mean girls chat. And Abby takes advantage of the fact that Kathy is not in the den or hovering over Vivi to yank Vivi into the studio, get her in the costume, make her run her dance,
which I'm totally cool with.
I'm not saying parents shouldn't have like agency over their children, but your children also need to have agency. And sometimes that just so gets lost in the translation. It's not good.
I also think there's a difference between saying, hey, I would like my kid to learn this and do this to teach my kid. Because if you apparently know how to do it, why are you not doing it yourself?
Mm-hmm. And we know that like especially applies to Kathy. So Abby gets Vivi in the bee costume. She looks cute. And she has Vivi running the solo, and Vivi does not seem to be like, she doesn't seem to be anxious. She doesn't seem to be struggling. She's doing a great job. Abby doesn't even seem to be screaming at her, whether or not they just chose not to include the shots of that, or it's not happening. But I don't know. I feel like Vivi would have been like exhibiting signs of it, and we don't see any of it. Like, Vivi seems fine the whole time. She's doing great.
This is probably one of those times where Abby's like, this is a secret, so we're all good.
I don't even know that she told Vivi, this is a secret. We're not going to tell your mom. I think she just grabbed Vivi and was like, hey, Vivi, your turn. Here's your costume. Let's do that. Like, just kept, you know, that thing you sometimes do with kids when you know that, like, they're used to kind of an anxious attachment style. Even if you don't know that, you're like, okay, Vivi, we're going to put your costume on. We're going to turn on the music. You're going to show me your dance. Here we go. You got it. Like, I
Like,
think
let's go
even though
before your mom can stop us.
yeah, but like she's not saying that. She's not saying the quiet part out loud. She's just doing the like, and we're doing it, and you're good, and you've already run your dance, and you've done a good job, and now I don't have to worry about it. Vivi tries on her costume, and this costume was borrowed from Melissa, but it's important to note that this was a costume that had been at the ALDC, handed down through the decades from one dancer to another, and that will come back to haunt us. In an interview, Vivi tells us that she doesn't like makeup and costumes, and
If that's
Lord
not
love
the most
Vivi.
Vivi thing.
Vivi, again, she runs her solo. She does really well. Kathy leaves the front desk and she comes into the studio to watch Vivi dance. And the first thing she does is make a negative comment about the costume. In an interview, Kathy tells us that if Abby is going to insist that Vivi do this be solo, she might just reimburse Abby and they might not even come to the competition this weekend. But I also want to know what you think of Kathy's first reaction being like, if I can't have control, I just might not even let Vivi do the thing.
I would have been like, okay, bye. Here's
But I mean, like, as far as repercussions for Vivi, what do you think that does?
I feel like it teaches Vivi in a way, like, if you have enough money, you can get yourself out of anything.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought.
In part, but I also think it's, if mom doesn't like it, then I don't get to do it.
I won't get to do it. I don't get to do it. It doesn't matter what I want or what
Which
I've done.
Just builds rebellion later on.
Abby tells Kathy that she and Vivi are expected to take the bus this weekend. And again, I want to make sure we're reframing things correctly here. The competition is in Pittsburgh. So all Kathy would have to do is drive in her car from her own car, her C-Class, from Ohio to Pittsburgh. She still gets to drive herself and then ride like maybe an hour tops to the competition. Sit at the front of the bus. Kathy's like, no. She's like, what are we, on the Olympics? This is America. I feel like I'm in jail being made to ride a bus. And I'm like, what are you even saying? But B, like, do you not think that there are people in the studio that utilize school buses, public transportation, potentially some of the moms and the dads and the parents and the aunts and the uncles are bus drivers? What are you saying? And she feels like she's like, they're making her be like an elementary school student, and it's just, she's going off the rails.
She thinks she's an exception to every rule.
Oh, yes.
She's special and deserves special treatment.
She's special. She deserves special treatment. And when she's being told, like, no, and here's why, like, this is the thing you should be able to do. This go around, this should be an okay thing for you to participate in. She has to make it like, you're making me do this. She has to be the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Abby then offers to make the accommodation. She's like, okay, you can't go on the bus. We know you're like bus sick. I'll take Vivi on the bus so Vivi can be with the team. And Kathy says, no, we're not going to do that either. Nope. And I think that, again, she's isolating Vivi. It's not cool. And in an interview, Kathy tells us the quiet part very loudly that she doesn't like not being in control. And she feels like she's being made to be told where to be, when to be there, and what to do when she gets there. And she just doesn't like it. And I can't help but feel like I wanted to reach through the screen and shake her and be like, you are the most signed up for this. The other moms, the show dropped in their laps. They did film auditions and send them in, but the cameras just showed up at their studio. You're driving from out of state. You signed all the way up for this. What did you think was going to happen?
She didn't think.
And I also want, like, what is it with narcissists and needing to control absolutely everything? Even the things that, like, if you say to them, like, Kathy, you know how stuff works. Like, if you go to a dance competition as the dance teacher, you know you don't get to decide when your solos. So why did you think this was going to be different? Why do they think every situation is going to be different? Why do they think they should have control?
My guess would be so narcissism in and of itself can often stem from childhood attachment wounds. And those attachment wounds can be rooted in anxiety. And I think sometimes narcissists experience a lot of anxiety when they don't have control, just as we do. The way that they cope with that anxiety is what creates the narcissistic patterns.
I've always wondered. Anyway, Abby and Kathy continue to argue at the front desk, and it just devolves further and further, with each of them getting more and more flustered by each other. That's the thing about two narcissists arguing with each other. Like,
Nobody wins.
nobody wins. Like, ideally, they deserve each other, and they should be locked in a room to duke it out between themselves. We do not need to watch it and break it down, because it does end entertainingly, where even like Abby gets to the point where she's like, okay, I'm done, I gotta go, I've got other stuff to do. And as she's walking away, Kathy does the thing where she's like, I still need you to get me the address so that I can meet you for competition. Abby goes, you can look it up yourself and then meet me at competition. And I was like, touche, Abby, nicely done. It's now the next day, and Kelly, Holly, and Melissa go to Christy's house for lunch so they can talk about the Regina George of it all. And the moms agree that the exceptions being made for Kathy are just unacceptable. Except, I guess it's not all the moms, it's Christy and Kelly and Holly that agree with that. Because our dear friend Gretchen's just sitting quietly. They think that if Kathy and Vivi have something early in the morning and they're all required to show up to support them, that Kathy and Vivi should then
Reciprocate.
should have to stay and support their girls. Melissa tells us in an interview that while she understands the other mom's concerns, she just feels caught in the middle because she really likes Kathy. And poor little Gretchen, she's just wienering all over the place. Lord have mercy. Christy asks Melissa if she would be willing to pull one of Maddie Sol-Oh's to even the playing field. And Melissa says she doesn't know about that. She'd have to talk to Abby, and she'd have to talk to Maddie. In an interview, Melissa tells us that she thinks that Christy asking her to do this was completely inappropriate, and that Maddie has the two Sol-Ohs because she works for them. Which, on the surface, yes, correct. Two things. One, we know that Christy didn't just ask this out of the blue. She had, like, this whole lunch is a production setup, and you know they were given a list of things to talk about. Two, we have to remember that it's the language that we're talking about, and I think at this point, Christy's really saying, like, could we just not film any more of Maddie's rehearsals for the rest of the week? Melissa tells the moms that she doesn't think that any of the other moms would do the same thing if they were in her position, that they wouldn't pull a Sol-Oh. And Christy says she has done it, and she did it this year. And this is true and backed up by all the other moms. There was a chain of competitions called Dance Educators of America. And in order to go to their nationals, you either needed to win a state or regional competition. And Chloe had already won, I believe, state, and they were going to a regional. And Chloe, Paige, and Nia were all in the same age category. And Abby, wanting another win, wanted Chloe to compete. But Holly and Kelly came to Christy and said, like, hey, if you do this, our girls don't have a shot at competing at nationals, and that would suck. And so Christy said, okay. And she went against Abby, and she didn't enter Chloe, and Abby got mad at her. So I think this shows that the other three moms, when they're told, hey, your girl's getting an advantage, this is causing inequities, they'll change it. But I think the thing that happens with Melissa, and I think one of the big issues in this episode, is stuff's getting lost in translation on her. When we keep saying, like, it's important to note, we know what the language means. When the moms are asking for Melissa to pull a Sol-Oh for Maddie, they just mean they don't want it filmed more. They don't want it featured more. I think Melissa is really hearing pull one of Maddie's Sol-Ohs from the competition.
I think so too.
And I think another thing about Melissa is I think she thinks through if she's doing things to help Maddie win, no matter what the effect of that is, she's doing good parenting. As long as Maddie's winning, as long as Maddie's at the top, she's being a good parent. She's helping her daughter, which in one way she is, but in the way it affects relationships, including sometimes the relationship with her own younger child, it's not. Holly asks Melissa, and it made me sad because Holly's voice just sounded like sad and kind of hopeless. And she goes, what would your hesitation be in doing this? And this is where Melissa says that she doesn't want to hurt her daughter. And that's where I think we can really kind of see that, like, she thinks that what she's doing is what's best for Maddie. It is now the last day before competition, and Abby says she has complete faith in the girls, that she'd never send them on stage to perform if they weren't 100% prepared. And much like what Kathy was doing earlier in our episode, I think Abby is just trying to cover her bum. Abby is running Maddie's tap solo again and again. I think this is why the moms were upset. Like, who's gotten the most filmed rehearsal time with 2 solos that didn't need any changes? Why are we doing this? Melissa is greeting the other moms at the front desk as they come in, and she tells us in a voiceover that to help defray the cost of dance, she works and helps out in different ways around the studio, running the music, running tuition, keeping things going at the front desk, and working in the costume shop. And she edits music. And this is a way to remind us that Paige still does not have her music. And who is supposed to be in charge? For our auditory only listeners, I'm saying in charge in air quotes, because again, I fully believe production had a hand in this. I do not think it was only Melissa. Paige doesn't have her music and can't rehearse because of it. The other moms go up to dance jail, and they find themselves watching an acro class that Abby seems to be running. This, I also think, is a complete and total Abby and production bullshit and baloney stew, because Abby wanted to make it look like, look at all the things we do at my studio. The moms flat out said, like, when do we ever do this the night before competition? And again, I think it's also important to know Abby's whole studio was going to this competition. So why does she have seemingly the whole studio of juniors taking a several hours long acro class? These kids need to run their dances and then rest. The moms wonder why they're not running their solos. And in an interview, Abby reiterates that moms often don't have as much faith in their children as she does. And that just makes her really sad. That the girls don't need to be running their choreography over and over again. They need to be in class learning the basics of dance. And I don't know about you, Rachel, but to me, this sounds like a choir director who's saying that a group doesn't need to work on the piece that they're supposed to be performing. They just need to learn how to sight read. It's like, you're missing the point, right? Like, yes, learning the basics of dance means you will be able to pick up a combo really quickly and perform it in an audition. But in an audition, they're not looking for perfection. They're looking for potential. At competition, they're looking for perfection. So you're not saying what you think you're saying, Abby.
Yeah.
Christy says that Chloe's solo hasn't even been finished with choreography yet. And Kelly says that Paige hasn't been able to really rehearse with her new music, so she hasn't really rehearsed her solo at all, with the changes that she needs to have made to perform tomorrow. Then Christy, Kelly, and Holly decide that they're going to take the girls out of the acro class one at a time to run their dances. Kelly tries to go to the front desk and ask Melissa for Paige's music, and Melissa just kind of snaps at Kelly, and I can imagine that Melissa was feeling very overwhelmed. It's also important to note that Melissa loves the crap out of Paige. Paige was Melissa's maid of honor at her wedding. She loves Paige. And so I think, again, like, doing this to Paige probably made everything a lot more tense, because if there's any kid that Melissa doesn't want to do this to, it's Paige. It's her own kids and Paige, and she's doing it to Paige. So she flips out, and all her stress comes out in snapping at Kelly. Kelly says it's 8 p.m. and Paige still hasn't even heard her music, and Melissa just says, it's not ready. It's still not ready. It's been downloading for 14 minutes. There's nothing she can do about it. Christy and Holly come down to join them, and they say they're stressed because their girls haven't gotten to rehearse today. And Melissa says that Maddie only got to rehearse with Matt. And the moms are like,
and
you still got to rehearse. Or Christy and Holly say that at least Maddie got to rehearse, and Melissa starts yelling at them, saying that they have no idea how much she does for their kids. And Holly replies to this very calmly, saying that no one is questioning Melissa's contributions, which all hail Queen Holly. In an interview, Holly tells us that anytime there's a perceived confrontation, Melissa tends to deflect, and that there's always something else she'd rather talk about.
It's a trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
We know that
Melissa
she
says
does not have a solid grasp on how to appropriately have conversation with others.
no, she does not. She does not know how to maintain a friendship, and part of maintaining a friendship is being able to work through conflict. Melissa says in an interview that she thinks the other moms don't like her because her daughter's just such a great dancer and they hold that against her, that they don't realize all she does for their kids at the studio, and she does so much they just don't recognize that. And I think this is another thing, Abby being in Melissa's ear, kind of like inflating Melissa. And then between that and her inability to face conflict, Melissa is in a no-win situation with the other moms. Melissa then leaves the front desk and goes into the studio immediately to tell Abby what happened. And I really want to know, Rachel, what you think of Melissa's going to be recurring habit of going straight from the moms right into Abby when, like, we know it's important to vent. No one's questioning that. And Melissa's overwhelmed. She needs to vent. She needs to talk with someone to help work through what's happening. But going to someone in Abby's position of power in these particular situations that we're going to see moving forward, what does that do, and what does that tell us about?
It tells me that she
Melissa
has a
and Abby?
lot of learned helplessness.
Okay,
Which
interesting.
I think is where a lot of the enabling comes from, is that in order to be loved and accepted, this is something I have to do. Like, this is something I have to do.
Okay. I was always wondering if maybe she just didn't get it. Like, she wasn't aware quite of what she was doing all the time, because I think she did see Abby as a friend. She's like, I'm just talking to my friend. And it's like, yes, but your friend is a problem in this moment.
Yeah, I think she didn't necessarily see it as a problem in that way. She may have been like, well, Abby's a friend and she's going to help me. So if I'm nice to Abby and comply with Abby and don't rock the boat with Abby, then I'm going to stay safe. It's very much a different form of fawn response.
Interesting. The moms then meet with Abby in the den to discuss rehearsing for the rest of the evening. Holly, Christy, and Kelly are obviously upset, and they're trying to tell Abby that too many changes have been made to their daughter's dances for the girls to get ready. And Christy is near tears, understandably, because her kid's the one with the whole new dance. Abby deflects and invalidates the mothers. Oh, shocker, big surprise. We are all so unable to see that coming. And in an interview, Abby says that the moms are just in a tizzy because they think they don't have rehearsal time and that they think they don't have their music. And Chloe's mom is just upset because she has a whole new routine and Chloe is the only one with a whole new routine, and boo-hoo. And that's just a bunch of BS, which I feel like, again, this is another thing where Abby said it to camera and then they put it on TV and that made it gospel. All of the things that the moms were upset about were accurate depictions of what was going on. Chloe is the only one with a brand new solo. The other girls have changes to their solo, but Chloe's the only one with a brand new dance. That's not BS. That just is. Holly tells Abby that Nia has only practiced her dance twice with the changes, and Holly worries that that'll mean that Nia's not prepared. And Abby just says that, once again, they have no faith in their daughters and no faith in Abby's training, and that is how they leave us to head into competition day. We're getting ready to load up the bus with the girls, and once they take off on the road, I don't know, I feel like production had to have made them do this because Abby takes the roll call once they're already moving and on the road. So, like, I'm like, well, if you left anybody behind, it's too fucking late now. She takes roll call and everyone's present except for Vivi, and this is how we find out that Vivi and Kathy are driving themselves the competition in the good old C-class. Kathy tells us that the moms want her to be a part of the team. Do they really, Kathy? Do they really want you? Or do you want them to want you in your head? But she doesn't want to be on their team, and she doesn't want to be a part of it. And to me, it's just giving big 4-year-olds, you can't play with me, you can't come to my birthday party energy. Like, that's... Yeah, like, yeah. She a little like, you can't sit with us, but at least Gretchen had a reason to say you can't sit with us. Kacie doesn't have a reason. We arrive at the competition, and while the girls are getting ready, Christy tells us that she was pissed from the moment they arrived at the competition that morning because some of the girls were set up to look bad, and one particular girl was set up to look good. That Abby having Maddie do 2 solos just set everything up badly. She says that she's not surprised that Abby did this week, especially since they're in their own backyard, that if Maddie wins, Abby looks good. And this just sets us up for the day. Like, Christy was pissed the whole day. That's simmering tension for a long time. And I feel like from the interviews we're going to get moving on, they kept kind of like last week with asking Brooke and Kelly to talk about Brooke's leg over and over and over again. They kept asking Melissa and Christy to talk about each other over and over and over again. And that just kept that black mass of anger growing in their minds until they couldn't do anything or see past it. Melissa tells us she doesn't know why the moms think Maddie doing 2 solos is unfair. She doesn't know why they're worried about it. It's really none of their business. And again, I just think Melissa she doesn't get what's really being said, which is understandable. They're not able to use the regular language. And I think, again, I think this set everybody up for failure. And I think this was part of the show that they never could have anticipated. They didn't know, like, that they weren't going to be able to talk like they normally did. And these, instead of, coming together outside of production and sitting down and saying, like, hey, let's talk about what happened last week and let's work through it, they just kind of drove wedges of division in between one another. And it's sad, but it's understandable. Maddie takes the stage for her tap solo. Of course, she nails it. Of course, Melissa cries. Maddie tells us in an interview that what she's best at is tap and lyrical, and those are the kind of dances she wins the most awards with. Baby Kenzie's next, and she takes the stage, and in an interview, she tells us she's a mouse, and she has a tail, but the tail gets in her way sometimes when she does tricks. She's so cute. She does so good, and I could talk about her all day long. She comes off stage, and Melissa tells her she did so good, and everyone was clapping for her. Mackenzie goes, "I know, I heard." And I'm just like, I love this kid.
Kenzie.
Kenzie goes on to tell us that she loves tumbling. She could just do it all day, and like, yay, Kenzie! I'm so glad you were happy and that you did a good job.
Yeah. I have a client or two that will just cartwheel down the hallway. Like, yeah, when they love it, they love it.
They're only kids once.
Like, if your body can do that, go for it. Keep doing it.
Right? Like, Bumble Vivi is up next. Kacie tells us in an interview that she's nervous, but she thinks Vivi looks adorable as a honeybee could possibly be, which she does, okay? And Vivi is so cute, and her appearance is leaps and bounds better than it was before. Everything about Vivi's performance and togetherness is 1,000,000% better than it was the week before. The costume is good. The hair looks good as it's going to get. Kacie does not know how to do Vivi's hair. It's redemption arc for Vivi. She comes on stage.
Despite her mom.
That's what I'm saying, is like, yes, this is not a dig. Nothing I'm ever saying about Vivi is a dig at Vivi. It's always a dig at Kacie. Vivi deserves the world, and she only gets Ohio. Sorry. Vivi takes the stage, and she does great, especially for it only being her second solo ever, and she only had 2 weeks to learn the dance. She's doing a great job. She slips and falls once, so I think it's important to note that the costume she's wearing has stirrups, and it's like made of a velour material, so I could easily see that she just slipped on the stirrup. I don't think she just... As soon as she comes off stage, even though Abby tells us she really challenged Vivi this week with the tricks and the new choreography, and that Vivi did a good job, Kacie is in the audience looking unhappy and kind of disgusted. And originally I was like, I would love to think that these were shots that they took of Kacie throughout the day and then put it in there to make it look like Kacie was unhappy with Vivi's performance.
For myself, personally, I'm like, please tell me when I'm doing something wrong so I can fix it. Like, I don't want you to highlight my good things, but that's not what kids need. So for Vivi, an appropriate approach.
But that's
with
also not even what this is, because Kathy
Right.
wasn't the teacher for this dance.
Right. I mean, and a more appropriate approach would be her teacher doing this, but
Yes.
here's something you did really well. What's something that we could work on together, and having her come up with it, and then closing out with, and you did this really well. And we call that the sandwich method. I mean, we mess up, like, learning is just making mistakes. Like, that's how we learn.
Yes.
So, I mean, just taking it one step at a time, but allowing them to identify that for themselves. Because if you tell them and they were like, but I thought I did that really well, they're just going to get more discouraged.
Because that was the thing, is Vivi said the first thing when she was asked, how did she think she did? She said she did good.
Mhm.
And Kathy immediately invalidates that. No, you didn't. And it just
I mean, it's
sad.
what Vivi thinks. And Kathy's telling her, no, you don't think that.
In an interview, Vivi says, my mom wants me to dance even more than I want to. I love my mom a lot, and I like to dance because it makes my mom happy. And that got me right in the feel bads. And I wanted to know if you had any tips and tricks for parents out there, Rachel, about how to avoid, because like as parents, as humans, we all want like kids in our lives to get to experience something that brought us joy as a child. And clearly dance brings Kathy joy. We're not questioning that. And she wants that for Vivi. That's great. How do we avoid the pitfalls of projection? Like, you will do this, you will like it, and you will like it as much as I did, and you will do all the things I did.
Well, I have dealt with that with one of my the families that I've worked with. The parents, like, you're gonna do this, and if you don't do this, then you're not gonna get your driver's license with me. And I challenged them, and I was like, how is it any different than forcing a kid to play a sport that they don't want to play? And they really couldn't see the difference, because to them, like, that was something that they valued so highly, in contrast to sports. But I think it really comes down to, like, as a parent, and I just want listeners to know, like, I am not a parent, but I work with lots of parents, and I have parents, and that is my experience. And I think some of the healthiest parents I know say, if it brings my child joy, it brings me joy, rather than looking at their kid and saying, well, this thing brought me joy, so it's going to bring them joy. But being able to let the kid kind of take the lead and be fulfilled in that your kid is enjoying themselves and they're doing something they love and that they're good at, even if it's not the thing that you might have wanted it to be.
Kathy then tells us in an interview that it's been really hard for her trying to be a part of this whole ALDC team experience, because no matter how hard she tries to fit in, she'll just never be a part of their history. And I don't know, Rachel, I really kind of want to know, do you think that Kathy believes that she's trying to fit in? Or do you think that she's making excuses for why it's not working? This is something I've always wondered with, like, dealing with a narcissist.
I think
Do they believe the stuff they say 100% of the time?
No, I don't think so, because narcissists know what they're doing. She is making excuses in an attempt to. So there's a phrase that has come out a little bit more current recently, and it's called DARVO. It's deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. So it's DA and then RVO. So what she's doing is she's denying her part, she's attacking them, and then she's reversing the offender and the victim by making herself look like the victim.
That's good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Brooke Solo is next, and she gives a beautiful performance. But when the floor work contortion portion of her solo comes up, she catches her chin on some tape on the floor, and we see Abby like flinch in the audience. And I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't something that production chose to cut in. I wouldn't be surprised if this was Abby's actual reaction. So they have a long-standing relationship, the Highlands and Abby. I don't think she wants any of her kids to get hurt. I really don't think she wanted to see Brooke get hurt. And I think this is also, I mean, we hear them talk about it. This is something that happens fairly frequently. Brooke tells us herself in an interview that this is not the first time this happened. It happens lots of times, and that her neck and her chin are covered in scars. Brooke finished her solo without, even, she carries right on. She doesn't even, you don't even see it on Brooke's face, really.
Like the
she,
professional
blinks
she was trained to be.
Indeed. She blinks a little extra if you really watch close, but nothing. Absolutely nothing. You can tell she's used to it, and you can tell her training tells her, nope, this just is what it is. We'll deal with it when I get off stage. She finishes up her solo. She comes off stage, and Kelly tells us that she's glad things ended up going well for Brooke, and that her hip didn't bother her too much this week, and everyone is proud and happy for Brooke, that's what we want. And that's what all the kids deserve.
I think she also enjoyed that week because the choreography was not dumbed down.
It wasn't dumbed down. She was doing one of her old pieces. It was a piece she really loved. It was a costume she loved. We're now backstage with Nia, who's stretching and getting ready for her solo. Holly tells us that this has been a big week for Nia with lots of changes to her dance, and that she's nervous that it might cause Nia to freeze up while she's out there, which is foreshadowing, but not for Nia. Nia takes the stage and she nails her number. If you don't know better, you'd think she 100% pulled it right. Yeah, she aced it. Like the star, because she is a star like that. In an interview, Nia then tells us that she was really excited for her solo because she feels like she's improved a lot in the last few weeks. And I'm just like, yeah, you have. You're so good. Nia comes off stage. I'm a simp for all the babies. I love them all, and I want them to be happy, and I want them to feel good about themselves. Nia comes off stage, and Holly greets her in the hallway, and they're just very cute and very happy together, and they love it. And in an interview, Nia lets us in on a little secret. She says she forgot part of her solo on stage, and she just made the rest of it up. And
like the professional she is.
She is. These kids, and that's the other thing, is I think these kids just the moms were also saying this, they don't get enough credit. Like, Nia was 9, and she just went out there and she was like, whatever, and kept going. We're now finally to Paige's solo, and for our listeners who know what's coming, buckle up. For our listeners who don't know what's coming, I'm so sorry. She's running her solo in the wings backstage, and she tells us in an interview that she gets really nervous before she goes on stage because she's scared she'll forget her dance, but that the more she thinks about it, the more she feels like she's going to forget the dance, and she's just
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Kelly tells us in an interview that she's nervous for Paige, but she just hopes that Paige will go out and use her personality and charm the judges. And that was something that Paige had been known for. She used to get comments from judges saying that she was... I mean, everyone always said that Paige was a stunningly beautiful kid, but she was also known for giving like really cute, peppy facial expressions. That's why Paige takes the stage, and as cute and rhymey as that is to say her dance starts out okay. She starts to stumble very quickly during the choreography, and she freezes up, but then she starts over again. Not the whole dance, but she starts over from where she is, and unfortunately doesn't make it too much further into her dance before she's completely frozen in terror on stage.
I think that second part, I mean, I think she went on it and then she started forgetting again, and she just psyched herself out.
Well, and you can see it when you go back and watch. These were the parts that line up with the lyrics and the music. And they were small changes. If you watch the new choreography with the changes compared to the old choreography with Boys, 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 this is something we know, like, if you learn something, it takes you a very long time to unlearn it, and then it takes you an even longer time to relearn it as something different. If you go straight from not unlearning it, but relearning it as something different. Paige would have needed potentially even more rehearsal time than we saw Maddie get. And Maddie didn't have changes. And again, I'm not saying Maddie didn't deserve all of her rehearsal time. I'm saying all of those kids deserved that amount of rehearsal time. Paige is now frozen in fear on stage. And to the point that Kelly has to tell her from the audience, go off stage.
Because she can't
She has to be prompted. No, she's completely,
that's the zappy brain.
Frozen. Yes, she is in fight, flight, or freeze. She is completely frozen. She has no ability to go anywhere. And she's in front of a group of people whose entire job right now it is to stare at her.
Frontal lobe was not working quickly at all. It had shut down because
hard to watch.
She's like under such stress That's the
Abby
zappy brain
tells
juice.
us. Abby tells us in an interview that Paige looked like a deer in headlights and that this hasn't happened to her in 25 years, which I would like to call BS on because we all know that Abby kept a mental catalog of every time every kid in her studio forgot a dance. Abby says she's humiliated and Paige should be humiliated too, and I think that is an absolutely disgusting and aberrant thing to say about any child, let alone one that you're supposed to care about so much. She's a family friend and she is a 9-year-old. Or no, sorry, Paige was 10. For me, like as a teacher who went on to teach performance, this was so avoidable. From the production side, again, they could have dubbed the music, not necessary to change that. They wouldn't have needed to change Paige's choreography, no reason. On the teaching side, the entirety of Abby's studio and staff were there. And I just want to know where an adult was to come and tell Paige, baby, this is your solo. You've been doing it for however many months, a year that Paige had been doing it. Go out there and dance boys, boys, boys. Don't do the changes. Play Lady Gaga in your head. And if Abby yells at you, tell her if she can go out and do the dance in less than 2 days worth of rehearsal, then she can say something. Like, where was someone to come alongside of Paige and help her? Because there were so many people there to do that and no one did. Kelly carries a crying Paige back to the dressing room, and Kelly says that the part that Paige did do was really good, but Paige says she knows it's not true. And with context, the context that we now have, she says something that I think is really important. She says, this was my solo and I couldn't even do it. This was a dance Paige felt she knew, and Paige felt like I should just be able to go on stage and do it. It's my dance. Because at 10, Paige doesn't get that what they were actually asking her to do was an insurmountable task. Paige is begging Kelly to go home, and Kelly says, I'm sorry, we can't. And she just holds Paige. And
which that part was like so tough for me to hear. Like, there's this really stressful thing, and we both really want to get out of here right now, but we can't. We are stuck. And unfortunately, like, we have to do this together. And I think that's where co-regulation is the most important, because Kelly could have gotten upset. She could have gone and yelled at Abby. She could have, like, there are a million other ways that it could have gone off the tracks. And instead, Kelly chose to, you know what, we're going to get through this together. We're going to remain calm. I know that you're stressed. Like, just, depend on me for your regulation and we'll get through it together.
I also feel like this moment might have been a moment where Kelly was sitting there being like, oh shit, what did I get us into? Chloe are now getting ready for their solos. Maddie's first up with Cry. And as Melissa takes Kenzie out to go watch her sister perform, Christy decides to ask her one last time if Melissa will pull the solo. And I feel like this is a moment where producers had to have gotten in Christy's ear, because rational Christy had to have known that, like, at the last second, Melissa wasn't going to go backstage and yank Maddie out and be like, you're not doing that. Like, nothing was going to happen. And we know all day they've been riling these two moms up.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. If it was staged, then it was terribly staged. And
I'm not even saying it was staged.
If it was not staged or provoked,
I'm not saying it was staged. I'm saying I think producers might have been like, aren't you going to ask her? This is your last chance. Like, I'm not saying it was staged. I'm saying I think it was egged on. Christy has also, like, said many times that this is one of the weeks that she absolutely wishes, above all things, she could redo. She wishes she knew, like, not even knew now what she knew then what she knew now, like, in regards to what was going on. She wishes she had the coping skills then that she has now. She's just
Don't we all?
I had... Right?
Don't
She's just like, I had nothing. I knew nothing, and you can frickin' tell. And I go off on everybody, and I would take all of it back if I could, but I can't. Maddie comes off stage, and we see Chloe and Maddie kind of passing each other in the hallway, going different directions, and Chloe gives Maddie a hug real quick. And Melissa says in an interview that Christy was mad because Abby put 2 solos in for Maddie, which is what happens at every competition normally anyway, so she really doesn't understand what was making Christy upset. And again, I just think this whole thing was lost on Melissa, and I think this just sowed so much discontent and so much discord between the moms, and I think that part is sad. When I when I say in our bio that like reality TV is our Roman Empire, you and I, if 50% of our lives have been our relationship so much about reality TV, and one of the things I think about is I'm like, yeah, I wonder what would have happened to the moms if Dance Moms hadn't happened. I know I wouldn't know. Anyway, Chloe's finally up for her performance, and right before she goes on stage, we see Maddie hugging Chloe backstage in the duet costume that I brought up earlier. So this duet was performed this day, and this will be important shortly. Chloe tells us in an interview that before she goes on stage, she usually gets a little nervous, but she just does her knuck crackle, which is what she calls cracking her knuckles. And she goes, "Brr," and she goes on stage, and she does it again in her just like her little Chloe-ness, which is, she's so cute. They're all so cute. She takes the stage, and her emotional execution is absolutely beautiful, but she does fall out of a turn, and she bumbles in her arabesque, which is understandable.
And she's what, 10?
She's 9.
9.
She's 9. This is the first time she's ever learned to solo this quickly and then had to perform it, a whole new one. And it wasn't even done being choreographed 12 hours ago. Chloe finishes her solo, and for having learned a new solo in 4 days, she deserves all the accolades. It's too bad the judges don't know that she did that in 4 days and was competing against people who'd been performing their solos for a year.
I mean, that
should get its own category.
That reminds me of a conversation I had. I can't even remember which client it was, but I was talking to one of them, and they were doing something related to sports or dance or something athletic, and I am not an athletic. I don't know if you know this, but I'm not an athletic person.
No, really, Rachel?
If you see me running, you should probably be running too, because something's probably changed me. But I told this kid, I go, it doesn't matter how poorly you do, because you will still be better than me. I can't do what you can do. Like, even if you suck, even if you miss that basket, you're still already doing better than Miss Rachel is. So when you go out and you go do what you do and you start to like get down on yourself, just remember, hey, I'm already better than Miss Rachel.
We better be careful when we say we're better than Miss Rachel especially on the internet. We might get in trouble for that. In an interview, Christy tells us she can't even look at Melissa right now. It's always about Melissa's daughter, never about anyone else's, and she wants Melissa to know that their kids count too. And I do think it's important to note that the language that Christy is using here, she's saying their kids count too. And yes, she's particularly mad on behalf of Chloe, but this is something that we don't always hear later seasons. We never hear it with Jill, and we never hear it with Melissa. They're never inclusive of everyone. Holly and Kelly and Christy, they care about all the girls. And I'm not saying Melissa doesn't care about all the girls. Mm-hmm. She obviously does, but she can't she can't see past it. Mm-hmm. Melissa tells us in an interview that she doesn't care what Christy thinks, because Christy would do anything for her own daughter to win, but she doesn't have to do anything for Maddie to win, because Maddie wins on her own.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure,
did wonder,
but I'm sure.
Like, I wonder, like, does Melissa really not think that like all the extra things help Maddie win, that Maddie doesn't just go on stage and magically win, that all those extra private lessons, that all that extra attention from Abby helps at all? I wonder.
I think she's just that unaware.
It might be one of those unanswerable questions, and I'm just like, Melissa, I know you're out of it sometimes, but you can't possibly really, you can't.
I think she is. I don't know that. I think she's naive. I think she's just not.
I think so too, but like, there's naivete, and then there's finally made it to awards, and Chloe takes 4th. And in a very rehearsed sounding interview, Maddie tells us that she doesn't like to lose, but it doesn't matter, because she doesn't lose. She doesn't ever lose anyway. And this is not something I think that Maddie ever would have said. Mm-hmm. Maddie takes 1st with Cry. We don't hear anything about her tap solo. We get a shot of Melissa turning to Christy in the audience and saying, "Undefeated, aren't you happy?" And Christy replies, "No, I'm not happy." And it makes it appear as though Melissa was gloating to Christy about Maddie's win. That's not when this was shot. This was shot after Chloe and Maddie got first for their duet that I've been talking about. And so Melissa was trying to celebrate with Christy about their girls winning together. And Christy was so upset that she couldn't enjoy that moment.
Which is really sad.
No one else wins any awards that are mentioned on the show. They do win more awards because we see the girls coming in with boatloads of trophies, but they don't talk about them. Christy told us in an interview that her daughter was still learning her solo 12 hours ago and was expected to come in here and not fail. And the other kids were set up to fail. And she says she's done and fed up with today. And she starts crying and says she doesn't want to talk anymore. And again, knowing what we know now, I really just feel like she was tired. Like the producers, we saw it last week with Brooke and Kelly. Like Brooke didn't want to answer any more questions about her damn hip. I think Christy's like, I'm tired of you asking me stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of talking about this. We start walking back to the dressing room, and this is the beginning of the end in more ways than one. Because Christy calls out to Abby and says she wants to speak with her in the hallway. Abby refuses, saying she won't let Christy ruin the day. Christy says, I'm a paying client and you won't speak to me. And Abby says that nothing is worth that much money. And
I mean, I don't approve of how this was handled by anybody, but you know, it's reality TV.
I'm on no one's side for what we're about to head into. In an interview, Abby tells us that the worst thing that Christy does is talk about her in front of Chloe because it makes it impossible for Chloe to trust her, which I would generally agree with. Like the statement is something that I agree with.
Mhm.
However, the application, because Abby says terrible things about Christy in front of Chloe.
Trust is built through repeated positive experiences, and that doesn't exist with Abby.
Christy begins to confront Abby in the dressing room, saying that what Abby really doesn't want to ruin is the weighted victory, and Abby yells back, no. Christy says she wants to go in the hallway. And I do think that this is a little bit important. Again, I'm not on anyone's side. Everyone here is wrong, and what happened is wrong. But I do think it's important, and it gets glossed over, that Christy asked multiple times for them to go into the hallway. And Abby and then Melissa both force the issue and say no. And I think at this time, they all knew each other long enough to know that Christy wasn't going to shut up. So not responding to this was going to lead somewhere not good. This forces the confrontation to remain right in front of the girls. Melissa yells at Christy, saying that she's making Maddie and Kenzie cry, which I'm sorry, but it's like, you know, the teacher screaming about kids being quiet in the hallway, you screaming at another mom about making your kids cry, your kids seeing you upset and screaming, especially at someone else they care about, that's not going to help. That's going to make them more upset.
You can have
And I'm not saying that
co-regulation and co-dysregulation.
there, that one, that's the problem. That's the word I was looking for. Christy, at this point, fully boils over and screams at Melissa about Chloe having beat Maddie. This is, again, right in front of all the girls. We see Maddie and Mackenzie in the background, so these are the girls we see the most affected, but it is important to note that all the girls were there. Abby interjects, screaming that she'll take Chloe's national title away in a minute. And this just continues to devolve further. All the girls are crying. Christy, Melissa, and Abby continue to scream at each other. They're calling each other names. Abby makes jokes about Christy's education, calling her an uneducated mess. And she also makes a joke about Christy drinking too much while grabbing an unopened bottle of wine. I don't understand. The point here, again, I think everyone is wrong. I just think Abby is making inappropriate jokes. She's bringing in things that have nothing to do with what they're talking about, and they're really inappropriate to say to anyone, but particularly in front of any children, let alone that person's own child.
I think that's a thing that narcissists do, though, is like they start, like, when they realize that what they're doing is not working, they start just throwing things out there and hoping something sticks.
And they often try and do it with like the things that they know are most sensitive to that person. Kelly helps Melissa get Maddie and Mackenzie out of the room, and she tries to calm down the girls. Melissa says she's not taking that fucking bus. Back in the dressing room, Abby tells Christy that she's out of control, and Christy agrees with her and says, she's like, you're right, I'm out of control for staying at your studio, and I need to leave. Abby then leaves the dressing room, and we think that Christy is alone, but the camera pans over, and we once again see that Kathy has been there the whole time. She's just standing there holding all of her stuff like a pack mule. And she asks, how did I get stuck in this? And normally I would be like, shut up, Kathy, but I found this to be the levity I needed. And to me, I'm just like, you really should have taken a page out of last week's playbook here, Kath, and left after Bumble Vivi buzzed off stage. You should have flown right out of there. And
Yeah.
that is how they decided to end this episode. We get no closure, and to me, it feels very similar to like watching a big family fight, and everyone, you know, goes to their separate corners. Like watching a big family fight when you're a kid. Everyone goes to their separate corners, and you're just sitting there like, what? Like, as much as I don't like some of the choices the editors make, every once in a while I'm like, oh boy, you really hit the nail on that head. Ow. There are so many hot button topics in this episode. The way Abby treats any student that is different, but particularly Nia.
Corporal punishment.
There's going to be a lot of it. Yeah, corporal punishment.
That will be just a bunch of research links that I have compiled over time. Lots of peer-reviewed studies relating to corporal punishment.
I will make sure there are some links for teachers looking to expand how they treat students of different races, and for students dealing with teachers who do not see race as something they need to be aware of. Everything we've talked about in our past episodes still applies here, and we will still have those resources available. Rachel, what is your takeaway from this episode?
Co-regulation and co-dysregulation. We
I
see
think that's a good one.
co-regulation occurring with Kelly and co-dysregulation with Melissa.
And we will continue to see it. It will be a pattern that we continue to see. My takeaway for this episode is, what was it, Darvo?
Darvo.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try and keep that one in my mental back pocket. Yeah, thank you for sticking with us through this wild and wacky adventure of the first ever solo week. As always, I am Kacie, not Rachel.
And I am Rachel, not Kacie.
And we will catch y'all next time. Bye.
CBT in the TV is hosted by Rachel Sprague and Kacie Campbell. Our show is produced by Rachel Sprague, Kacie Campbell, and Yakov Paley. Editing by Yakov Paley. Our theme song was written, composed, and performed by Emily McNally. Please join us on Instagram and TikTok at CBT in the TV for even more fun and access to the resources mentioned in today's episode. Thanks for joining us.